Welcome to the Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the exploration and cultivation of the outside genius found in neurodivergence.
Everyone, I'm going to introduce you to Abby Frazier. Abby was my intern for a while, and she's coming back to talk to you today just about her experience and her gifts, because Abby's definitely a gifted neurodivergent. She has savant abilities, and she's profoundly gifted in a multitude of different ways. And she has that inability to want to work for others and do the drone monotonous, wears her out, it makes her stressed. Abby's going to talk about her journey and how she just moves through the world. Abby, tell us about yourself.
The first thing that comes to my mind when I'm asked that is just that I have a lot of things that interest me, a lot of things, and obviously there's goods and bads to that. The goods would be, it's good to have an interest in a lot of things because maybe you don't get bored very easily and you can kind of keep your mind stimulated. And if you have like physical activities that you enjoy, which is not really my case, but that's obviously good too. But the downsides would be that it's hard to kind of focus in on one thing. Like sometimes I kind of feel like I'm stuck a little bit because like I had a conversation with my brother about this recently. He's a musician and like 90 to 95% of his focus is on music and everything he does is music, and he's gotten really, really good at anything music related because he puts all of his time into it. And in my case, I'm putting time into Korean studying, I'm putting time into Japanese studying, I'm putting time into music myself and editing, like video editing, photography editing, mental health counseling, like reading about that. So I feel like it's sometimes hard because I'm not putting all of my time into one thing. So I'm like, wow, I could be like totally fluent in Korean right now if like I stuck to that 100%, or wow, I could be having like a really nice job in photography right now if I put all my time and money into buying photography stuff. So I feel like that's a kind of a complicated way to describe something so simple. You ask, tell me about yourself. And that comes to my mind is like, there's just a whole lot of things to me that sometimes when somebody asks me that, I don't even know where to start. Like I can't tell them, oh, I'm a photographer, or oh, I study languages. I'm just a person that does all of these things, and I don't really know which one is me.
So what you're describing is just a big picture talent, because what you are doing is you're building a new talent. You're building something that people haven't done before. And the reason I know this is because I'm doing it. This is what I've done. And I honestly didn't come to it till probably late 30s, maybe early 40s. And it was a really slow moving process, but you have a massive head start on me because you didn't go through the system that tells you need to work for others. You went through homeschool. And so you're just in this space where you're supposed to be. And if you look back 100 years in our history, we have younger people, if their parents were of middle class and above, they were allowed to dabble and travel and try to figure it out. And they went to school and they got educations, and then they sort of settled into a career and they got married and had children. This is the people that had a little bit of money. If you didn't have money, then you kind of went to where everybody now goes to America, which is working for others, and you're in a grind, and you just like you're faceless, you're nameless, and it's so hard to break free. That was my growing up. I was quite poor, so I had to work through that to get it, and that added 10 years at least. If you have the opportunity to get ahead of that, I say go for it, and you're doing that, and that's all I can say. But do not beat yourself up at all on the fact that you haven't settled on one thing, because you are not supposed to. Your evolution is your evolution, and you're supposed to go the way you're going. Somehow all of those will come together to be something amazing and fantastic, I have no doubt.
I feel great that you say that, and it's also kind of funny because I remember probably when I was maybe 12, maybe a little bit younger, I can't remember the exact time frame, but I know it was definitely before like teenager years. I remember kind of jokingly telling my mom like what I wanted to do when I was old. And I said it as a joke because in my mind at the time I was like, yeah, this is impossible. Like nobody does this. You can't do that.
Yeah.
In my mind I was like, I told her I want to make a movie. Like I want to write the movie. I want to direct the movie. I want to star in the movie. I want to edit it. I want to add the own music to it. I want to write the articles about it. I want to market it. I want to promote it. Like I want to do everything myself. And so like I always said that was what I wanted to do, because since I had so many interests, I'm like, well, since I want to do all of them, I just need to do it all myself. And, even recently, now I'm like, okay, and now I want to do a Korean translation of my own movie. Like, I just want to add everything in that I can possibly do and make my own, like, huge thing. And, back then, like I said, I would say it as a joke because you don't watch a movie and then see one person in the credits. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And I know realistically I would probably need some help. I think it would be a little too overwhelming to do all of that myself. But now I'm starting to see you can do more than what people might expect of you.
It isn't unrealistic. There are people who do it. I can't think of any off the top of my head other than Yoko Ono, and she's a poor example, but she is a woman who dabbles in everything. There are plenty of artists out there who are one-man bands because their aesthetic is so clean, so sure. It's such an emotional exercise for them that they really don't bring in other people. They make everything themselves. And in doing so, they notice details others will never notice. When you break it up and you have specialty, you end up missing the big picture. And the big picture, not everybody sees it, so you're going to be talking to a niche group, but if you see it, you change the world because you can change the perspective of the people who come and see your art, who see your creations, who get to know you. Because big picture is really where it all comes together and you make change.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I have that viewpoint. When I go into any project, right now I'm working on editing a video for a particular event. I always get around to it, but sometimes it's hard to see like the small details because I'm thinking of like how it should look in the end. And so I'm having to fill in each part. One of the things that I do in video editing is I like to edit maybe like movie trailer style, music video style things, but I don't have the people to film. I'm not a professional music video filmer or something. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go on YouTube and find an artist or a band and download a bunch of their videos and make a music video for them. I'm just going to give a random artist. John Mayer, like, okay, he's one of my favorite artists. Like, I could go on YouTube and find a bunch of videos of him and then clip them together and edit them in a way and make it look like a music video that his team would have edited. So that's one of my hobbies, is doing that. But what's really cool about that is if you're actually recording music video, you can tell the artist, like, do this, do that, I want this shot, I want this lighting. Since I'm not doing that and I'm having to work from things that are already existing, I have to shape them with editing to fit the image I have in my mind. So I'll edit the color and the lighting and I'll put different video clips together. And it's a really fun, cool thing because I can go back and find videos like 10 years ago and clip them together with one that was 2 months ago and edit them to make them look like they're filmed in the same scene. That's kind of how my mind works. Instead of looking, the first scene needs to be like this, the second scene needs to be like this, I see, like, I don't even see it. It's like I feel it. I feel what the ultimate video is going to be. And then I have to go on YouTube and I have to edit and I have to put it together to make it become what I'm seeing and feeling in my mind. So that's kind of how I edit. And you were asking me about the Korean thing too. I think that's kind of how I do anything. It's not just editing. It's like I feel something, I see something as a whole, and then I fill everything in to get to that point.
And this is perfect because this is the creative process, what you just described. We don't recognize they're creative intellectuals. We sort of stick them all in this music art. But truly, creativity is an encompassment of all. And the smartest people I know are creative intellectuals. They're just creatives, period. The creatives' brains are so brilliant that they don't focus on executive functioning. They don't focus on these things that are day-to-day fitting into the system. No, you're supposed to be out and you're supposed to make your own way. And if we didn't have creatives, we wouldn't freaking be where we are today as a species because we've created most of those things.
Yes.
And, yes. We're taught to beat ourselves up because we're not right. But the whole science or psychology of the system is to maintain the society as it functions. And you are supposed to be right where you are because you're going to be one that brings in a whole new perspective to that society and changes it for the good. How do you deal with the fact that you're an outlier, that you have your own personal aesthetic, and that you move through the world knowing that your way is your way and you're not going to alter it? What kind of things come up? What conflicts? What resolution? What is that like and how do you handle it?
I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a comfort feeling sometimes because I've always felt like, and this kind of sounds weird, but I know that you'll understand it and likely anybody else will understand it. You know yourself the best in most cases, and so I feel like it's kind of a comfort thing because I feel like I don't have to have someone telling me what to do or somebody telling me how things are supposed to be or how I'm supposed to feel or whatever, because I am myself, like I live with myself, I am myself, and so I kind of know in a way. It's like kind of, I guess, like a sensing sort of thing. So yeah, I would just say like it's kind of feels like an inner compass or something. I feel like that's a weird way to describe it. That's kind of how it is. And you mentioned like conflicts, and I would say there is conflicts. There's goods and bads and everything. So I would say anytime that working the way I do or feeling the way I do has come up as a problem would probably be in situations where I'm working with other people or like a lot of other people. I've seen it in group projects in college. It's not in general. Like I don't have a problem working with people. I get along with people great. There's not really anyone I don't get along with. I can work with anyone. I can follow rules, like all of that's fine. Actually, I don't even know if I can tell you a specific thing, but I just know what's coming back to me right now is a group project that I worked on in school last year. And we had to come up with communications, and we had to write a play of a couple in conflict, and we had to like write out script by script their actual conflict story, and then we had to come up with a resolution. Me and 4 other people, I think. I was having a really hard time with it because all 4 of them were agreeing on this one part being in there, and the whole time I'm like, that throws the plot off so much. It's distracting, it's going to take a lot of time, it's not going to be a smooth flow. It just didn't feel right to me. But I just kind of went along with it because I'm sure everyone is used to this feeling. Didn't want to be the odd one out. Didn't want to be the one that is causing trouble or doesn't agree with the rest. So I kind of just went with it. And then we had got up to be 2 days before the due date, and we were nowhere on this project. And I kept feeling the whole time, I'm like, this thing is keeping us stuck. This thing does not belong in this script. And so I kind of last minute came in and I was like, do you think we could maybe blend these 2 plots, or maybe just take this plot out? And I kind of explained to them that like I thought maybe it would flow a little bit better if we did it this way. And they were like, yeah, sure, why not, like that sounds like a good idea. And we did it, and we got it done in like a day. Like it went so smooth, it went so great. And then we submitted it, and it got a 100 on the project. So not that it wouldn't have gotten 100 before, because it still probably would have been fine, but I just feel like that was one of the conflicts for me. Maybe nobody else would notice it, but in my own self, I was like, oh, that, doesn't really feel right with me, because I'm just thinking, this is not working. It was that kind of feeling. General, I noticed positives from it for the most part.
Yeah, I think that we're trained to be a part of a collective in the school system. And so if you've had any other experience like working on your own, you sort of learn to trust yourself. But when you're in a collective, it's always about the group and moving the group forward. And so you learn to give up yourself. And so what you just described was kind of beautiful, because you knew when to kind of wait and explain it. And then when at the end, when everybody couldn't see the path and you could, you're like, okay, back to what I said a while ago without being rude about it. Let's just try that. Let's just go with my gut here and let's just try it, because you've learned to trust your gut. You've learned to use your intuition, because intuition is unrealized cognition. It's trying to get it there. It's guide for you and your self-learning. And we are not taught that. We're fed things in the system and we work from the bottom up. But if you're creative, you don't work that way. I'm not sure that really anybody does, because really our school system is about behavioralism and training, not really truly about cultivation and you figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
You talked about going through that with your peers. How do you trust your own aesthetic? How do you know when to trust it, and how do you know when to let it go?
I was actually just thinking, I was almost going to say that in the other story, but I was like, it's irrelevant to what I was saying. So it's nice that you asked that, because I was just thinking about it. I feel like that, again, kind of comes back to the I'm me, so I know myself kind of thing. I feel like most of the times I can kind of guide myself in the right way. Just in that example I gave, how I decided to explain to the group, giving them another suggestion, explaining why I thought maybe something different would work better. It's because I kind of just had that knowingness, and again, and I know you know what I mean. It's not like you're having thoughts in your mind that are telling you these things. It's like it's just a sense, it's a feeling, it's kind of just like an existence in you is kind of how it feels. I was like, I just know this is going to work. I know it's going to make things better for all of us. It's going to be smoother. We'll probably get a better grade. The teacher will be able to read it easier. It was just all these good things coming together that I was like, it makes the most sense for us to do this. But usually when I have those feelings, I go for it because it just seems like I usually don't even question it. I'm being led there by like my own sensing, I guess. And so when it's the reverse, it's the same situation. Like if it's something that I know is not a good idea or it's not going to work, I don't even participate in it. I don't say anything about it. I don't do anything about it. I just let it go, because as much as I know that the other idea is going to be good and it's going to lead us down a good path, I know that the other feelings are also as accurate. It's pretty nice because I usually don't have to question things too much. I just kind of feel them and I go based off of how I feel. And most of the times things turn out okay. And when they don't, I can't really say what that's down to. I don't know if that was like a false sensing kind of thing, or if something, maybe I wasn't sensing it and it was just like an overthinking kind of thought that I had. But in general, I feel like most of the time things go kind of the way that I expect them to based on how I feel they're going to be.
So let me put that into context, because that knowing thing is actually the future thinking. It's the futurism foresight ability. And what it is we mental model in our brain. So wherever your giftedness is where you tend to have that knowing feeling. And your brain is mentally modeling it, but it comes up as an emotion of like, kind of like, let's test this and let's go here. And it's like just kind of a little like, I wonder if we did this, and I think it's going to go this way, but you can't manifest it until you experiment it, and then you can say, yes, I know that it will go here now. Because what it is it's part of our learning style, and I'm writing up educational system based on this. The creatives do not learn bottom up. They do not learn linearly, like our picture's so big or our picture's so detailed, that's just not applicable for us. What it is we actually take this picture and what we already know, we sort of stop seeing, and then we focus on the parts we don't know, and then we weave what we know with what we don't know, and we sew or something like that part in.
Yeah.
And we deduct like negative space. Every time we know something, we will chunk it. So then we're constantly pulling parts out to reveal the real solution or theory or whatever. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My daughter is a math savant and she's in college math, and she could do graduate school math at 10, and she doesn't know any formulas. She doesn't know math theory. She creates her own. And you're describing that same thing. And if I didn't have a math savant in my house, I would be like, the feelings, the blah, blah, blah. But it's not, it's actually really scientific. Like what you're doing is an actual deductive reasoning to the right answer.
Well, it's crazy that you said that, because I was describing kind of the way I've been learning Korean, which I know is another one of the topics you wanted me to go into today. And so that's how I've been learning Korean, because over the 2 years that I've been studying it, I haven't spent $1 on like a course, a textbook, or anything. I've just not taken the traditional route that when somebody's like, okay, I'm going to go learn a language, I haven't done that. Instead, I have learned very similarly to the math situation you just described. I know some things that there's a website that I look at, and they have things divided into lower intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced, stuff like that. And I have just briefly gone through all their different folders just because I want to see like what their definition of advanced is. And I found out that I actually knew some grammar and some concepts that are in the advanced course, and I don't even know some of them that are like in the beginner course. And I'm like, wow, that's really weird, because typically when you're studying, you go from like kind of building blocks. It's like you're going to learn the basics, and then you're going to learn a little bit more basic, and then you're going to gradually build. And instead, I haven't done that. It's like I learned the basics, which is the alphabet, because you kind of have to do that. So I learned that, and then from there, I just started learning anything else. And now I'm kind of at the point where I can sometimes figure things out without even actually like formally learning about them, but kind of like you said, based on something else I know, I can figure out, oh, well, this must mean that, and this must mean that. And also, since I have like the empathy with people, that is really, I almost want to say it's like my main guide when it comes to learning Korean and translating, is because if I know the people that I'm translating, in which most cases I do, because I typically translate the same people over and over again, since I know them and I know their personalities and I can feel people's personalities, when I'm reading the text of a Korean thing, there might be, say it's a paragraph, there might be 4 or 5 words that I've never heard of. It's just vocabulary words that I've never heard of, don't even know what they mean. There might be 1 or 2 grammar points that I've never read about before. But there might be one little section that I do know. And I know enough about the person's personality that I can put that together, and I can feel the message without even knowing what it means quite yet. I can feel it. And then I start going from there. And obviously, when you're posting online and you don't want to misinterpret anyone, I go through several steps to make sure that what I'm saying is 100% accurate, because I'm not going to post anything online or tell somebody this person said this going 100% based off of that feeling because, the wording can make a big difference. So when I say that, I don't want it to be misinterpreted as like, oh, I'm not even checking to see if I'm accurate before I tell somebody. I definitely do that. But I mean, initially, when I'm trying to understand it myself, that's how I do it, is I think of the person, and then, again, like I said earlier, it's not even thoughts, it's a feeling. Like, I just look at it, and I feel it. And I especially have that in Korean learning, because, there's some words that they don't even have a direct English translation, like, it just doesn't exist in the language, yet somehow I feel it. And it's so weird, because I've tried to just casually teach people some Korean sometimes, like if they want to know a word or if I want to tell them something, I might try and tell them, but I've come across this situation where I can't explain it to them. Like I was trying to tell my mom recently about this one Korean word that's used over and over and over again, and it can have a different meaning in so many different contexts, but in English it only translates to one context, like it translates to one word. But in Korean, and depending on the context, it can mean so many different things. And I was trying to tell my mom what this word meant because I read this comment that almost made me want to cry because it was just so deep and emotional, and I just felt it. And when I tried to translate it, I'm like, this is not deep in English at all. Like, it is not capturing that meaning. Sorry, I'm like going off on a rant here, but
no, it's perfect.
I'm like, it's not capturing the meaning, and so it was bothering me because it didn't match. And so I'm like, if somebody were to go Google Translate this, they're going to think, wow, your translation is like totally off. You just added like 10 words that aren't even in the original translation. But that's because I have to put 10 English words in to capture the emotion of the one Korean word. And so it's like, I was telling my mom, I'm like, why is it that I can't teach you what this word means? I'm like, I'm an English speaker. I'm not a native Korean speaker by any means. So like, how is it that I was able to learn it, but I'm not able to explain it? It's like the sensing that we've talked about so many times. It's just like, it's so hard to describe.
It's hard to describe, but it's also very simple because it's an internal thing.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm supposed to go. It's a self-trust. And in order for you to be able to develop that self-trust, you need space to be just with you. And I don't know that a lot of people have that. So that's really actually the part that makes it hard to describe. Because for you, it's incredibly clear, and everyone who has had experiences like you would understand exactly what you're saying. But for those of us who have not, it's foreign. I mean, why does that have anything to do with anything? And it's like, oh, it has everything to do with everything.
Yeah, it is. It's so crazy to me though, because there's so many words to me that are that way, where I learned them somehow as a non-native Korean speaker, yet I can't explain it to another non-native Korean speaker. Like, I'm trying to tell them, I'm trying to think in my head, I'm like, well, how did I learn it? Like, how can I explain it to them? Because I can go based off how I learned it. And I'm like, I don't even know how I learned it. It just like, it was on the page and then it just like seeped into me or something. Like, it never even went through my brain. So I can't even explain like, well, this is how I learned it. This is what I thought. I saw it and it existed. It was just weird.
It's the pattern understanding, because your brain weaves together all those things. And so your brain is weaving together your ability to see where that would fit and how it fits, and you create your own unique pattern. The world creates very black and white patterning, and you're creating something multidimensional. So you're like noticing that this meaning has many dimensions, and you're building this little model for just that word meaning. It's all subconscious. Your emotions come up and they're like, hey, Abby, you know this. Go in that direction.
That's exactly, like, I feel like if those little feelings in me could talk, they would have just said what you said. Like, they're just talking to each other, and I'm up here and I can't hear any of it.
And they do actually start talking. At some point they start talking. When I got older, by the time I had children, my second child, I was like, wow, this crap is pretty loud now. It was having children, I think, that made it really turn on. Your baby needs this. You need to do this. And it really started talking to me and telling me things then, because it was about another person. And it was like their life depended on it. And it would come up and it'd be like, wow, I just know what to do. And they say like instinct. It's instinct. But it is you modeling the world, because some people seem to lack instinct on how to raise their own children, or how to raise even a plant, or how to raise a dog. I mean, some people don't have that, but yet they have this other capability of how to pull a car engine apart and put it back together. I don't have that.
I'm same here. Like, that makes me think of my brother, Sam, who he can just do. It's like, I don't even question how he does things, but he can tear apart anything. He can put it back together. He can fix anything. He can figure out the problem of like anything. If I have anything broken, I just hand it to him. I don't even think about how he's going to fix it or if it's even possible. He's going to find a way. He'll fix it. That would be him. I mean, he doesn't have any kids for me to know if he has the other sensing or not. But he definitely has the other kind.
Yeah. Sam and my husband was mentoring Sam, and Sam are similar brain and can do that too. He can pull anything apart and put it back together. So Sam is brilliant in his own way. And when he gets children, he'll pull them apart and be like, okay. But he won't pull them apart like quite to the same degree. But children break down to things and then break back up. And Sam will use that. And Sam will be fine as long as he can relax.
That's a very important step.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell me how you relax, because that's another thing is when you're interpreting, I have a lot of anxiety and panic when I'm listening to people speak in foreign language. The older I get, the more things I'm using in my subconscious. When I'm talking with people, until I get to this certain level, I'm in so much anxiety. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I don't typically call myself a relaxed person, ever. I don't know if that word will ever go in the same sentence as my name. But because of that, I have found a lot of techniques and a lot of things to help me. So although I'm not a relaxed person in general, it's not who I am, I can help myself get that way because I've experienced stress and anxiety so much that what are you going to do? Of course you're going to find things that work and don't work because you're stuck living that way. And you just naturally have to do things and you're going to end up seeing naturally these things are good for me and these things aren't. Are you asking this question specifically into the language translating or just in general?
I'm asking both. I know that you struggle a little bit with anxiety, which we all do. That's kind of a part of being sensitive, but like a reward and benefit of that high sensitivity. The anxiety comes with it because it's trying to help you focus and it's saying there's a lot. And then also, on the flip side, what's kind of guiding you. I run into it all the time and I'm quite a bit older than you. I could be your mother. I always wonder how, especially young people, are still working their way through the journey of managing anxiety because we have two options. It's manage it outside of us or manage it inside of us. And that's your only two options.
Yeah, and mine is definitely inside. That's always been the way that I handle it. This actually ties into what I said a little bit earlier about going off of your own guide, knowing how you are. So I myself know what stresses me out more than anyone else could. And if you were to ask me, okay, well, what is that then? What is it that stresses you out? That's another one of those things I can't really put into words. I mean, other than basic stuff, obviously, yeah, taking tests, going to interviews, those things are kind of natural for everyone. But I mean, the more specific things, if you were to ask me what they are, I wouldn't really be able to tell you because it's more so just, again, I feel like I feel things more than I think things. And so it's like that. I can feel when something is going to stress me out. I can feel the sensation of things and kind of tell that's going to be stressful for me or this is going to be good for me. And so as somebody who's had many, many, many panic attacks in their life and will probably have many, many more, that's what my sensing shifts into. So when I get into that panic mode, obviously I start having all of the symptoms that come along with it. But immediately, those inner feelings start kicking in too. It's like they're working. I feel so weird describing this because it doesn't make any sense in general.
It does, though.
I know you're going to understand.
Yeah, it does make sense.
It feels like those, little people, those little voices we were talking about are inside of me, at a lower level, working to, calm everything down. It's get rid of this, let's focus on this, bring this in. It just seems like a whole army of people inside of me trying to bring it down. So it's where the nervousness is happening more in my head and more symptom-wise, the actual things that I guess pertain to the anxiety itself, they're inside me working. And it's really kind of cool in a way because that's not something that other people can do. I've found over time, because used to when I'd have panic attacks before I knew anything about any of this stuff, I would go to someone immediately. So whether it was my mom or another family member or a friend or something, I would just start going to them and I'd be oh, you got to help me. Please talk to me. Please distract me. And it never worked. And I was so confused by that because probably anyone else, I would go online and search how to stop anxiety attacks or tips for anxiety. And one of the number one tips, every article was talk to someone. If you start feeling that way, go talk to somebody and they're not saying a doctor. They're saying just generally talk to family, talk to friend, whatever, whether it's for distraction or advice, just talk to them. And I'm like, okay, I do that every time. It never helps. And like, I could go through the whole list of tips. Like go for a walk, drink water, lay down. I'm like, these things don't help me. And so for the longest time, I thought that I just had, like, I was just going to have to live with it forever. Like, I'm just always going to struggle like this. I'm not going to, like, because these things is what everyone says works for them and it doesn't work for me. And over time, I started finding out that the best thing for me to do when I feel like that is to literally just be by myself. And you never see that on articles. They never tell you that. They're like, the first thing they tell you is like to be in a community, be around people. And so that's what I did for the longest time. But now if I'm having a panic attack, it's like I immediately go to somewhere where I can be totally by myself, because the inside of me like knows what I need and knows what I don't need. And I don't need the distractions of other people looking at me, talking to me. I don't need the sounds or anything. It's like, I feel my most comfortable in that state when I'm by myself. And so that's why when I had my part-time job last year, it was not good for me, because if I was around people and if I'd get kind of anxious or panicky when I was around people, I couldn't just be like, okay, well, I'm leaving and I'm, no explanation. I couldn't do that. And then, if you remember me telling you this story before, they eventually let me start closing the shop by myself. And so you might think, oh, that's great because you're going to be by yourself and you're not going to have the pressure of other people around you. But actually, no, because they were still relying on me as the only person there, meaning that I still couldn't just be by myself if I needed to be. That's why that was traumatic for me. Going back to your question about like how I deal with it, that's honestly what I would say is like if I'm feeling that way, I just kind of go inward and I don't think about what's going on around me, and I can kind of even like disassociate myself sometimes, like take myself out of my head and just like exist until it all sorts itself out. I just talked to my mom about this the other day because we were talking about the high sensing and everything, and I told you that we have this concert coming up next week. I don't know why I have to feel so nervous and so anxious leading up to it, and why I have to feel so depressed when it's over. Like, why do I have to feel these things these deeply? I mean, most people, they have average excitement and nervousness leading up to a concert, and they're a little bit sad when it ends for maybe a couple days. They go back to school, they go back to work, they're totally fine. Me, on the other hand, I feel like something's been torn out of me because this concert that I was so excited for is over. And then me and my mom were realizing this at the same time. We're like, yeah, but that also probably means that we enjoy the concert experience more than those people can. We're feeling it deeper. We're into it more. Like, we're not just going to have stronger sadness and stronger nervousness. We're also going to be able to have stronger happiness, stronger feelings, like everything stronger. When I started thinking about it like that, okay, that's actually pretty cool. Like, I might be literally the only person in that venue having the best time of everyone because I'm feeling it so much.
You're having like a religious experience essentially, and you're going to have those intense experiences your whole life because this is a part of a giftedness. This is a part of your high sensing giftedness, and this is a part of our overexcitabilities. I have come to realize that my overexcitabilities have that high and low in every freaking situation of my life. High, low, where I'm going like extreme happiness, extreme sadness, extreme excitement, extreme fear, extreme. But what it is that you're laying down layers of understanding between all of those. So the higher and the lower is all your memories mapping each of the sensing details of the whole experience so that you can almost go into that in your head and experience it all over again, almost in heightened than you were in that moment because you were overwhelmed. And so your body 3 days later is still processing it. And that's so why. True. Yeah.
That's so true. We just went on a short little day trip to the mountains a couple weekends ago. And I have kind of a fear of heights. I just don't like anything that I feel like I can look down on. And we drove to the top of this mountain. Highest height I've ever been. And I was so scared, and I was like taking pictures on my phone, and I was making sure to look through my phone and not around me. And I literally said this to those that were around me, which is my mom, my dad, my brother. I told them kind of like in a joking way. I'm like, right now, I'm just here. And then when we get home in a couple days, I'll look back at my pictures and be like, wow, I did that. Like, I went to the top of the mountain. Look how nice it looked. It was so pretty up there. That's how I work. But in the moment, I'm so scared. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even want to think about it. But once things are calmed down again, then I can go back in my memories and be like, wow, that was so much fun. That was so cool. So yeah, that's exactly what you just described.
Yeah, I know I'm not a big camera person because I feel I'm overwhelmed by the situation, and the idea of having to also think of the camera and focus on others is almost too much. Yeah. But I also realized that that my husband is. And the reason he is that it allows him to go back and experience it later because he's just a little bit less sensitive than I am. And so this is his way of reliving it multiple times over. Whereas I, in that moment, I'm such a sensor. It's like, I'll have this in my head forever. Thanks.
In that case, I have both.
Yeah. The thing that's valuable for him is he's giving me a prompt to bring it back up. It's beautiful because I can tell him, did you notice this, this, and this? And be like, no. And I'll add context to that memory for him because he was running around with the camera, not using all his senses. He was focused on that. And it is amazing how we can focus and blot out things and then also unfocus and accept things. I think that the way our brains work and the way our sensing works, we've pretended it's like one size fits all in that area, but it's very, very much not so. When we go into understanding how our sensing intelligence works, how we move through the world, gathering data and gathering that deeper context, and then we can compare and contrast it to others and other experiences, it keeps adding depth to these experiences of our lives so that when you're 100 years old and you look back, you'll be like, now I see it in a whole new way, and that's the millionth way you've seen it. So now you understand why your highs and lows are exceptional to others because they're laying down layers that you're just going to keep laying down. And the more you lay down that first time, the more you can lay down further because you have more connections to add it to. It's an advantage. I mean, it's a scary advantage. Like there's times in my life where I will go back in my head and notice something. Like I can sort of bring up a situation with my emotion and go back and like ask myself a question about the situation and it will zero in on the answer and I'll know it and I'll be like, oh, well, glad I know that now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's almost like you have a constant video recording in your head and you can go back and play it as long as you remember it. Go back and play it at any point and notice things that you didn't even notice while you were there. It's a really cool thing. And I think that being able to think like that is actually what helps me in so many of the creative things I do, whether it's video editing or writing or anything, because I feel like I have, all my, well, maybe not 20 years because I probably don't remember my first 3 years, but 17 years, I have 17 years of memories. I can go back and like any point in time, I can just notice different things. And yeah, just like you said, focus in on certain elements and everything. And like, I think kind of going back to the anxiety question too, for my whole life, I've always heard people refer to me as having an imagination. I've just heard that word associated with me for so long, my whole life. Everyone would always have my name and imagination, like in the same sentence over and over and over again. And I didn't really have an opinion about it one way or the other. Like they usually would be saying it in a good way. And if they were saying it in a bad way, it wasn't a bad way toward me. It was more so like I was scared about something and they're like, oh, you and that big imagination. Like, of course you're scared of this. The anxiety thing, that definitely plays in because we were talking about how we can kind of relive memories and go back to them. I also, and I know you can too, and anyone that's has these things, they can do that. I can create situations in my mind that have never existed and never will exist, and they're just as real in my mind as if I had actually been there.
Yeah.
And so I have dreams like that. All of my dreams are like 3D, super detailed, super realistic, like everything's accurate, like everything feels very realistic. And that's why when I have a good dream, I'm like, wow, that was great. I feel like I can add that to my memories of things that I did, but I actually never did it. And so that's how my whole mind works. And so with the anxiety stuff, people can wonder sometimes, like, how do I get so anxious about something? Or like, how do you get so worried? How can you have a panic attack about that? And that's because in my mind, I am picturing this whole story as if it was real as ever. Like, as if that thing had actually happened, that's what it would have been like. That's how my mind plays it. And so I can get really, really scared about those things. And then obviously it works in the reverse too, where I can create a situation that I would love to happen, but never will. I can kind of create like a very realistic image and memory in my mind in that way. It's good and bad, obviously, for the reasons I just described, but it's weird and cool being able to not only like imagine and live out experiences that you have had, but also ones that are totally fake, never happened, never even real.
So you just described basically foresight abilities, and I kind of said it already, but I really want to go into your anxiety is bringing up your memories. It's bringing up information. It's bringing up understanding. It's bringing up things. And as you get older, you will go like, okay, this is why you go by yourself. There is a sensory deprivation thing you need to do in order for you to fully process all that information coming up. So we're like in a battle all the time of trying to process what we already know and add it new and what we're currently doing in our environment. And when you're in the morning time, like when we first wake up, all these things are coming at us, all our brains flooding, it's coming online. We are like a supercomputer as far as brains go. And so our brains have a lot to connect and bring up, and they clean up each night, and we have all this high sensitivity, and so we feel crappy, we feel this or that. But really all of it is your brilliance sort of like coming online, and then it's delivering something. And the older you get, the more you go into it, and the more you're like, okay, what's the message? What's the message? It will sort of reveal it to you either in pictures or sound or smell. Like, I mean, there's all these ways that it can reveal itself, but you'll start to notice the patterns of, I smell this every time I'm supposed to see this person. I mean, we have these weird way our sensing comes in to bring us on a schedule. They talk about neurodivergence and the creatives not being good with schedules, not being good with remembering things, but it's because we don't go by that. We have such a complex brain. It's bringing up all these cues, and then it's taking cues from the environment, and we're trying to put them in order and create this world. And you're talking about your imagination. And what that imagination is that modeling. It's that brilliant modeling you have in your head, and you're able to see all these scenarios if you were born into this life, or you were this and that. And that's why they put imagination as part of your intelligence for children. Because imagination is what shows that ability to model. So I do have on my Substack page a foresight group, because there's so many big picture savants or autistics or ADHDers or all these, or dyslexics, like all of these groups are known for having this ability to do what you're talking about, the imagination and the modeling. And yet we've just pathologized in it when it's actually a beautiful gift. I mean, my life would be not nearly as clean or healthy right now if I hadn't had that gift, because I would be emulating the situation I came from, which was none of those. So you will always be pushed to better because you are modeling all the possible scenarios. And why the heck would you go down the wrong ones if you could tell that they were going to be wrong?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I know, like, for me, growing up, kind of, we talked about earlier, like, I homeschooled and everything. You get the responses, you get the reactions like, oh, how did you ever make any friends? Or how did you learn anything? How will you ever get a job? How will you go to college? You know, you get this question. That has kind of contributed to me being the way I am, and in a good way, because like you were saying earlier, you don't have the influence of people. You're not being told to be one way or the other. I definitely feel like I was never told to do one specific thing or to follow one specific path. It was how I spent all my time. I would do my school stuff with my mom, and then I'd finish up and I'd go work on videos. I'd do stop motions. I would go on Microsoft Word and write scripts for movies that were never going to exist, but in my mind, they're very real, and I'm writing a script for it. I'd go on Microsoft Paint and I would draw things. Like, that's how I spent all my time. If I also had the addition of those people and teachers and people kind of saying, no, you're supposed to do this, I would probably be much different right now. But as you know, since this is who I was born as, I would still have everything that I have right now. I would just not be nearly as in a good place. I can definitely see how, you know, when you describe these things to me, how things have kind of come about in the way that they have. Like, it's very clear to me.
Yeah, definitely your life has been organic. And so you have evolved as you should have evolved. Other people are thwarted by that who are like you because they went through a system that pushed them in a direction they are not naturally. So they didn't figure out how they evolved. They go through a lot of emotions. Their emotions are constantly giving a message of, this isn't you, this isn't right for you, you hate this, this is your Starbucks job. This is the job where you are like, I hate this, why am I doing it? Because you don't have control over your space. You don't have a control over your ability to go and create using what you learned. I mean, we do really need a lot of space in our lives because we are creators, and creators need to stop and process. And that's supposed to be that way. And if we really allowed everybody to create, we'd be in a much healthier space than we are right now as a country, because creating makes new ways of seeing, being, and doing. And we would have more efficient ways. We would have probably those cars that George Jetson drove, because we would be just further along, because we wouldn't all be trying to be the same, because that's what robs innovation, is when we cut that out or we keep you down and we only give it to the wealthy or a few people whose parents changed the whole world around. I do want to mention, though, you're the youngest of 5. So you did have a lot of people in the house.
I was never alone. I'm still never alone.
Yeah.
Like, there's always somebody around.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they're all like me, too.
Yeah.
So it's like I was being surrounded by people. I mean, even my mom and, I mean, my dad, I am definitely like a 50-50 split of both my mom and my dad. Maybe had I been an only child or something, it could have been harder on me. I don't know. I could probably imagine it because, you know, like I said, I can create stories that aren't real, but
Yeah, I could see you being a huge director in Hollywood because you had nobody else, and so you were really making those movies all the way through when you were a kid.
Thankfully, my brother's like, we team up together all the time because he also was, there was a time period where he was making videos all the time too, and I never really felt like I was weird around them because we were all the same. When I started to feel weird, and even then, I don't mean it in a bad way, things like that don't really bother me that much, but is really when I did get out around people for the first time was when I got my first part-time job. I was 18 years old. I was like, wow, this is how, like, people act. Like, outside of my house, this is how people act. I was seeing, kind of weird customers or people would ask me things, and I'm just like, who asks that? Like, who thinks to ask like that? Understood them, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, this is weird that this is what real life is like. I've always been the odd one out. Like, I mean, there's a picture of me. It's so funny if you look at it. There's a picture of me in church when I was 8, I think. And there's a group, my whole class, and there's, I think, like 18 people. And they're all huddled in a circle around some task we were doing. Here's the circle, there's me, I'm over here, all by myself. I went to vacation Bible school a couple years later. There was a group of 31 people, and ironically, the table sat 30 people. I was the one that did not have a seat. And I sat at a table with 30 seats by myself. And the pastor comes up to me and he's like, do you want to like sit over here? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. So I just sat there at a huge table all by myself. I was the only one.
I can answer the question for you. First off, I run into this a lot. The parents are worried that the child's not going to have friends or whatever because they are sitting at a different table. This is why I sat at a different table. And I would force myself into the group, but it was overwhelming. You and we take in so many inputs. We know so much about people. We need the space for downtime. We need the space to have our big picture view and not be in it, because being in it is overwhelming. It's details, and our brain takes in the details and lays them down, but actually doesn't process them in that moment. By sitting back, we are able to take in the details nonetheless, but we're not overwhelmed by them. And then we can be like, yeah, hey guys, how are you? I'm working on my stuff. Because it allows you to focus on your thing. You have a probably really high proprioception, which is your ability to feel, sense others outside of your space. And I think it's like 10 feet. And I always tell people we should have 20. Because ours is double. Do not sit so close to me unless you are my child or my significant other. Please do not crowd my space because my body has already mapped those people. And so when they're next to me, I'm not taking in that many inputs. But if you're kind of new to me and you're like trying to crowd me, I'm like, I just feel you. I feel you so much. And while I might learn a lot from that, I need to do it slowly because I'm laying down so many layers. I see it as a sign of intelligence. I see it as a sign of sensing intelligence. And then you don't have the blocks that most people do because you haven't been told to be a different way. You've allowed to be organically live the way you are supposed to be. So yours bubbles up and it's clear to you and you know and understand it. And that is a beautiful thing. You have been blessed with a beautiful thing. You have been fascinating for most people because you have lived an organic life, and that is so rare today. And you're not going through the emotional turmoil that most people who are like you go through if they've been through the system and they've been told by other people, you're supposed to fit in. You're supposed to like groups. That doesn't really actually exist. There is no supposed to. They're just making that up so that you fit in with the cattling of people. You are not even an introvert. You're an ambivert. I know you swing both ways. I know that from just being around you. But you have so much that you're taking in that you're like, yeah, now I got to go process that.
Really?
So I think most people who are high processing on the people pattern side, they tend to be ambiverts because they are so high processing and they love people, but they're also like, yeah, and I'm going to need some space. So you keep rocking on being you, Abby, because I think you're awesome.
Thank you so much. I will. That's the only way I know how to be.
Yeah, that's the truth, isn't it? It's the only way to be. It's the only healthy way.
The views, information, and opinions expressed on this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent Gifted NT Incorporated, Lillian Skinner, or the Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast. This podcast, Lillian Skinner, and Gifted NT Incorporated are not responsible and do not verify the accuracy of the information contained in this podcast series. The primary purpose of this podcast is to inform and educate. The Gifted Neurodivergent Podcast is only available for private, non-commercial use. Any other use of the information contained within this podcast must be done with express written approval and knowledge of Lillian Skinner. You may not edit, modify, or redistribute any part of this podcast. The developer assumes no liability for this podcast or its use on any other podcast or other media.